Why do so many people fear speaking up, even when they know they have something valuable to say? In this 100th episode, I sit down with speaker coach and TEDx speaker Dave James to explore public speaking, fear, confidence, rejection, communication, and the stories we tell ourselves. We talk about why people crave happiness and how to trust the connection shaping communication, and why learning to be seen can completely change your life. This is a powerful conversation about finding your voice, embracing discomfort, and realizing that impact starts one person at a time. Welcome to You Matter, I Matter, a transformational podcast about reconnecting with what truly matters. I'm your host, James, and each week is an opportunity to explore a little bit deeper who you really are. With amazing guests, we explore topics such as purpose, connection, commitment, and what it really means to live more consciously. If you've been feeling disconnected from yourself, from others, or from life, you're in the right place. Join us on You Matter, I Matter. Now, let's begin. Welcome to the 100th episode. Christ almighty. That's been actually 101 weeks because as I record this, which is a few weeks before the 100th episode, I missed my first ever podcast last week. So it was 96 I did in a row, and then I missed one, and then I'm back on this week, 97th, 98th, 99, and you'll be the 100th. So welcome,
wow.
Dave. Dave did the podcast episode to do with happiness and was the most seen episode so far. And I thought I'd have him back and have a conversation.
Thank you so much. And it'd be interesting to see whether actually people watching the episode on happiness, whether it made them happier. That would be the interesting one. I'd like to think it did, but we shall see.
I think the fact that they looked for that episode on happiness obviously means that something is going on, that people want happiness, don't they? And
people do.
That idea, yeah.
People do. And this is the thing, isn't it? Where you say to people, what is it you want? I want to be happy. And it's like we put it out there as a simple thing, and actually it's not. It's simple, but it's not easy. But we put it out there, and that's what people want. They want happiness. They want ease. They want some convenience. And happiness is something a lot of people talk about.
I think happiness is easy. I just think it's easy, but it's hard.
I would say that, so this is where I always love the distinction between simple and easy, that something is simple. We have a process we can follow. We know that you look at the work of, and I've forgotten his name now, it's just popped out of my head, but there's a guy in the 1980s who did all the happiness research where he had a happiness program. And there's 14 or 15 things you can do to be happier. Very simple to follow. But in practice, when you've got the world and you're trying to deal with the world, how easy is it to implement those things? And sometimes I think it isn't. But this is proportionality bias as well. We look at big things and we think that a big problem needs a big solution. And actually, sometimes a small solution, like a daily meditation or a little walk out in the fresh air, can make a huge difference. So I love it. It's a fascinating thing to think about and discuss.
So let's start off with celebration, because it's been 100th episode. It is a celebration. Right. So what have you done? What's been going on in your life that you're celebrating at this moment in time?
Oh, so that's a really good question. And I have to acknowledge that 100 episodes is a huge achievement. 100 episodes is a huge achievement because people will watch these things and they'll go, yeah, I'm watching an episode. And it's easy for them to duck into it, spend some time listening to it, or relatively easy. But everything which goes on behind the scenes, the reaching out, the conversations, the booking of people, the sending of links, the post-editing, all of that kind of stuff is huge. So I've got to acknowledge what a big thing that is to be able to do this. And I'm assuming you're not like Stephen Bartlett on his Diary of a CEO thing where he's got like a team of all people and someone's going to pop out behind you with a camera and get some B-roll footage of you doing this for later on, that it's all you. So it's a huge thing. So I've got to acknowledge that. But to your question about, God, what am I celebrating at the moment? It's been a really good year so far. And when I say really good year, it's very easy to kind of think, oh, it's been a really good year financially. And it's not been bad. I'm doing all right this year. I still can't afford to pay anyone to trim my beard for me. I have to do that myself, and I'm happy with that. But I'm doing a lot of the work which I really enjoy. I I celebrated my second TEDx as well. So I did a TEDx in Tamworth last year, which ended up as editor's pick. That was the men's mental health one. This year, I was really lucky to get to do a second TEDx with 16 days notice. I was coaching some people for a local TEDx and somebody sadly couldn't do it. And I was asked by the organizer if I'd step in. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do it. So 16 days to build a new TEDx. We're getting closer to that being released. Fingers crossed. So that's good. And the other thing I'm celebrating is I had a diagnosis of ADHD about 6 weeks ago. And a couple of years ago, I started to explore that. And it's only really came to fruition recently with the forms going in and all of the other stuff. I had the diagnosis and I started medication. And I'm actually celebrating the fact that it's given me a real insight into what goes on in this very egg-shaped head of mine and how it shows up in the world. And there's a huge amount of acceptance and clarity and choice as well, and things which I can do, and certainly self-compassion, which is really interesting. So those are the things I'm celebrating at the moment, and the world's largest mug, and that is a mug of tea, which is almost as big as my head.
I say it's half the size.
It is, yeah. I could, in fact, I think I can't quite do it, but you could get your fist in there if you wanted to. If you were a slightly smaller human than me, you could do that.
I know if I had that cup of tea, I'll just be within half an hour. I'll be going to the toilet back in two.
Yeah, I'm a man of a certain age. It's like when my prostate says you need to go for a wee, you listen.
Yeah. So, just going back to your TEDx, what was your TEDx on this time?
So it was one of the things when I did my TEDx last year. It was delightful. It was the one on men's meditation and mental health and talking about anger and community, and that for me is that passionate thing which I love to talk about. I love to be able to share some of the stuff which I've experienced in order to see if that will help others. And also there's been a real, and I don't like to use the word therapy, but I suppose it's probably the best word for it. There's been a real therapeutic process in looking at my experience and how can I communicate this to other people. But when I got the chance to do the TEDx this year, I wanted to do something which was more aligned with the work I do, which is the speaking work and the speaker coaching work. So I wrote a speech called The Power of Public Speaking. And what I did is I used all of my tools and techniques, which I use with my clients. I turned them, mirrored them, applied them to me, and went through the whole process of creating a speech with that framework. And it worked really well. And even just having done one TEDx, you'd think, oh, the second one would be easy. And it's not, because there was a whole lead up to the event where I was going, why are you doing this? You can't remember any of it. That sounds silly. Why are you saying that? And there was this all kind of internal narrative going on. And about the same time, I was going through the ADHD. The documentation had finally gone in the beginning of January, and I'd put in my assessment documents online. So I was still going through that interesting phase and had no diagnosis, but suspected. So I've got all of this internal chatter going on. But I took my framework, I applied it to me, and then did everything which I would advise my clients to do in terms of embodying the speech, and then got up there, delivered it on the day, and really had fun with it. And I just wanted to be out there. I want people to see it and experience it and almost see the fun that I had with it as well.
Because I know that we're going to cover a little bit on public speaking and anxiety and fear and that kind of stuff. And I know from my experience, this year feels like there's been a big shift, a huge shift in regards to things that I would normally do last year, which would make me anxious or fearful. I just feel like there's this idea in my head going to do this event online yesterday, and usually I'd be terrified, but part of me was like, so what? And I was like, and literally, I just didn't feel what I would usually feel, and it just felt really comfortable. Yesterday, I did my second podcast episode where I was on somebody else's podcast. That was Amy Rullinson. I know you've done the same.
Yeah, Amy's brilliant. Yeah.
What I've noticed was that in the past, I would have been a little bit all kind of thing, but yesterday I was just comfortable from the very start.
It's a lot of this is time served. And when I talk to people who are going through the process of developing their speaking, there seems to be this jump where they go, I want to be a professional speaker and get paid £10,000 a gig. And I love that. And the people I work with, I don't coach them to get £10,000 gigs. And there's one very big reason for that, is that I've never had a £10,000 gig. So how can I tell you how to get one if I've never had one? It just feels a bit disingenuous. But that jump from new speaker to professional speaker is a really interesting one. For me, it's about going out there and speaking as often as possible, because you can't learn how to work with an audience and create rapport and connection and understand what you're going to say in those stressful moments until you actually do it, which is why I do stand-up comedy hosting. Because if you want to die on stage, go and do some stand-up comedy, because you will say something you think is the funniest thing in the world. No one in the audience laughs, and you go, that's interesting. And you have to be okay with that. But listening to you speak about that, and I love that. I love that there's that moment of, I've got this. This is cool. And I still remember when we first met, it was the Professional Speaking Association conference. It was the first one that I went to, and you were doing Speaker Factor. I remember when we met at that one, and it was brilliant. Time served.
I think one of the biggest fears is public speaking.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it can be terrifying. But why is it terrifying? Because at the end of the day, we have this fear of people rejecting us. But why do we fear people rejecting us?
It's a risk to status. It's a risk to our status. And status is something which sits within all of society. We're constantly comparing our status and our worth and our value to other people. And the whole world is trying to market solutions to us to improve our status by, at the same time, telling us that we're not good enough and our status is low. But when you stand up in front of an audience and you speak, everyone's looking at you. And you run all kinds of narratives. You've got all that historical stuff from being a kid where maybe a teacher pointed out something, or that moment where you did a school play and you didn't do particularly well, or that first time you had to do a presentation and you bumbled through it or didn't feel like you'd done a good job. But the perception of what we do in the moment as speakers versus the reality can be very different. I've done gigs where I've spoken and I've come off stage and I've gone, oh God, that was awful. And then somebody's come up to me and said, actually, what you've said has absolutely changed my perception of something. And in my brain, I'm like, how does that work? But it does. What we perceive is not actually reality. And it's when people come up and say, oh, you look really natural on stage. And I say to them, do you realise that I get nervous before every gig? I do get nervous. I'm worried about what people will think. I'm worried about what they say. I'm worried about doing a good job. I just now have enough evidence of speaking and gigs and showing up and standing on stages or floors or wherever it is and being alive at the end of it that it's less scary. Still doesn't mean it's not that it's the absence of fear, because it's not. But there are, and also I've got used to saying to audiences that 50% of you will be like, yeah, he seems okay. I might want to have a conversation with afterwards. The other 50% of you are thinking he's a bit of a tool. And I'd never go anywhere near him. He's not funny. He thinks he's cocky and confident. So everyone has this perception of who you are, but we worry about that perception. And actually, I am not responsible for what they think. I'm responsible to do the best I can, to give them the best of my knowledge and the best of me, and hopefully understand them enough to make sure that they get the right amount of it. And that's the
Let's throw something in the works here. Is it a person's perception of you, or is it their perception of themselves that they see in you?
Oh, do you know? And that is a beautiful question. And the honest answer is, I would say probably yes and no, and I don't know, and somewhere in the middle. I think that's a really interesting one to unpick. And partly, we think about storytelling as a vehicle of speech. And one of the things I say to people all the time is you've got to be telling stories as a speaker. If you give me stats and figures, brilliant, that's great. But if you tell me a story about what they mean, it makes a difference. And people sat in the audience listening to a story, if it's really well told and it resonates with people, they will see themselves in that story. And I'll give you an example. I spoke at an event yesterday. Never spoken in a field before, but it was beautiful. It was lovely. That's why I got a little bit red on my head at the moment, because I was out in the field listening to some other speakers, and of course forget that I'm bald and shouldn't sit out in the sun without a hat. And I'm speaking, and I'm actually talking about the journey through ADHD and what life was like pre-diagnosis and now afterwards and what it's been like for me. And I'd never thought I'd talk about that. And there was somebody in the audience who was crying, and I was chatting to her afterwards, and I said, "Are you okay?" She went, "Yeah." She goes, "But everything you said, I saw myself in you. I'm there going, that's me." So a really good story can do that for people. And I do think, back to your question, people are judging you, but they're also judging themselves. And maybe they go, that person's up on stage and look at them. They're cocky. They look like a natural. And why is it they've got that and I haven't? And then you look at your own self-worth and you go, that's maybe because I'm not good enough. Or it's so much to unpick with that. It's huge, a huge question.
It is, because my belief with regards to that is that everybody's projecting their own stuff onto other people. But quite often I feel like people can't see that, or a lot of people can't see that. And so they perceive it as you rather than as themselves. Whereas if they see it as themselves, suddenly they can own that. And if it's good or bad, which I don't like using good or bad because we have all of it anyway. But if it's depending on what it is, they can use that to strengthen who they are. So then suddenly they get better, their perceptions change, and they grow.
Absolutely. And we only truly see the world the way we see it. We see it through our eyes and through our experience. And when we judge others, it becomes really interesting. And I think about my mom with this. My mom will quite often say, if I was them, I wouldn't be doing that thing when she sees something on the news. And my answer to her very simply is, if you were that person who'd lived through their experiences and had gone through exactly the same process as said, you'd be doing exactly the same. It's very easy to judge, but without their experiences. And I love even speaking, I love the power of language. That difference between I think to I believe and the certainty we use in language, but also the understanding that when you see something which you might say, that pisses me off, the reframe is, I am pissed off at what I'm seeing, but I entirely understand that it's something in me which is doing that. And it's that reframe that if you get frustrated, you are getting frustrated at something. You are not getting frustrated by something. And that's not to say that there isn't some impact from what people do, and you can actually put some responsibility on that, but most of it's internally generated. But how we feel about something is how we feel about it. And we forget to own that.
Yeah, that's where the power, bringing your power back to you, comes into play. And the years, probably last year, let's say, for me, if I had done different things, my fear of rejection would allow my anxiousness and fear to really kick up. But because I've done so much work over the years on rejection, it doesn't affect me as much. So it still affects me, but it doesn't affect me as much. And I think it affects me when it comes to women that I like. There's still that little bit left in, or a little bit that I probably got unhealed, which I need to look at to heal a little bit more.
And we're always doing the work. We're always doing the work. And I both love that and hate it at the same time. I find it so frustrating. And I remember when I first started doing personal development, you go, I've sorted that problem out, it's gone. And then you'd come back round and you'd be like, hang on, this problem's still here. I thought I'd sorted this out. And instead of thinking that you just go round and round in a circle, what you actually do is you go round in this spiral which rises up. And you will always come across the same things. You'll just see them from a different perspective. I mean, my fear of rejection can be huge at times. There's times where I've missed opportunities because I haven't, business particularly, where I haven't reached out and said, oh, can I talk to you about this? Or I have this thing. And there's definitely a fear of visibility for me, which I'm working on. And it sounds, even saying that, it sounds bizarre when you think about standing on a stage in front of people and speaking, and it's a fear of visibility, because there I'm ultimately visible. But I know that's still a representation of the work I'm doing for myself. Still, there's always work to do, always work to do.
Oh, yes, it's one of those cliches where it's ongoing. And don't get me wrong, I love doing it. But at the same time, I find I get to a point like this year, the last few months, I've just got to a point where I need to come back to my body. I need to come back to myself. That's so key for me. Let's go back to public speaking. If there are people who struggle with speaking on stage because of maybe fear of rejection or whatever that is, or anxiousness, what are some of the things that people can do?
Do you know, it's a really good question. And what I find interesting is when people come to me and they say, what I want from the work we do together is to be more confident. And I want to be confident to stand on stage. And what I quite often say to people is, it's not about the confidence. It's not about you finding confidence before you do something. It's almost the other way around. You have to do something and then realize that the confidence is always there. And I have talked with clients about this idea of borrowed belief. is I believe everyone has the ability to stand in front of an audience and speak about things which are important to them. Everyone, regardless of it. And I'm saying everyone, and perhaps I should reframe it as most or many, because there will be some people who genuinely will never be able to do that. And some people who don't speak, so they can't use their voice, so they'll have to find another way of doing it. But what I find is if you can give people the tools and you can help them find something in their story which they're really passionate about and they connect with, that gives them the purpose to go and speak about it. And then you put them in a small space. It's like the exposure therapy. You don't people on these huge stages in front of thousands of people and you go, I'd never be able to do that. And you don't have to do that. For you, it might be that you stand in front of a room with 5 people and you tell them a story over 1 minute you've never told anyone else. It starts off with those really small steps. And I try with the workshops I do and with the work I do to create a safe space. Now, we talk about safeness and psychological safety and all of this kind of stuff. It gets bandied around a lot. I intend to create spaces which are safe, but at the same time, I don't get the honor of saying whether they are. It's the people within those spaces. And I'm just thinking back to a recent workshop I did at the beginning of this month, beginning of April. And we had 2 people who didn't want to get up in front of the audience and speak, which is absolutely fine. So instead, we explored things in a different way. Now, I could have just said, no, you're here, you've paid your money, get up there and speak. But I know that doesn't work for me. So you have to almost have this gentle interchange of, here's something which could be really useful for you. Here's something which you're really connected to. Now, if you get up there, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but actually you will learn a lot more from it. And you just gently start to introduce people to the spaces. And it'll be might be a surprise to some people if you've seen videos of me like on the TEDx stage. I still remember in 2016 standing in front of a local networking audience and was very glad that I was wearing my brown trousers. I was awful. I was absolutely awful because I didn't know what to say and I hadn't got the skills. But you start in those places and you start doing little things which make the difference.
It's meeting the edge. That's what I call it. Because it's almost like you don't want to get to the point where you're jumping off the cliff.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
you want to get to the edge so that you start to get more comfortable at the edge.
Yeah. And I described the way that I am in terms of personality. I'm very much like a non-Newtonian polymer, and I love that. I love that phrase. So a non-Newtonian polymer behaves in a way which is not in line with Newtonian physics. And the easiest thing to think about is custard. If you take custard and you put custard into a bowl which is big enough for you to stand in, and you stand on top of it, you sink into it. But if you jump up and down on it, you don't. It resists. The hard force onto it comes. It has an equal and opposite reaction of a hard force. And what I find is that it's the same with all of this stuff. Meeting the edge is you're not going up to the edge and going, come on, and banging through, which I know some people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it's pushing up about the edge gently. It's feeling it. It's being present with it. And knowing that edge that you could see or feel isn't the same when you're up against it, when you're pushing into it. And then you've got that realization, actually, you've pushed the edge a bit further forward. And a little bit further forward, and a tiny bit more further forward. And it's those small changes that make a difference. And I love that phrase, meeting the edge. That's a beautiful phrase.
It's yesterday I did so I'm part of this group called the Wealth Vibe, and each month a member of the group gets an opportunity to strut their stuff with what they're doing.
Nice.
And I did a meditation and then a bit of dance and movement at the end, but during the day, I couldn't get the music to play from my Zoom. I was having so many bloody issues, and I ended up going through plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and eventually we relayed on plan E, which is basically I shared my playlist and people played the music through their own phones. But it's that idea that you have to, whether it's public speaking, whether it's something like that yesterday with technical issues, whether it's life generally, you have to persevere. And once you persevere and keep doing it, it becomes easy, but also at the same time, you are reinforcing that, regardless of situation, you can get through it.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you have that. You had plan A, B, C, D, E, and all of those different plans. And my brain was going, okay, what would I do in that situation? Then you said the playlist, and I was like, yeah, that's probably what I do in that situation. What I suppose what I've realised over the last few years of doing this work is that for me, there's a really beautiful triangle in speaking, which is between you and you know who you are, you know who your audience is, and you know the content, you know your stuff. And all the times I see speaking generally go wrong is when it's the wrong audience, or they haven't thought about their audience. They're delivering something which doesn't fit with them because it doesn't resonate. You don't get rapport, and that's a problem. That you don't know your content, or you're having to deliver somebody else's content. That dreaded, oh, Johnny in accounts can't do the presentation today, but Dave, we'd like you to do it. Here are his slides. I've presented with other people's slides before, and it never goes well. And then you've got the knowing who you are. If you know who you are and you know what you prefer and you know your style of delivery, it works a treat. Which is why Zoom online is different. It relies more in visuals because of the medium, and you're not with people to get that connection. But I know if I go and speak at an event, I am biased towards having as little in terms of tech as possible. For me, it's me and the audience. I want to be with the audience. The tech is very minimal. And things like Menti, I think I'd have a heart attack with Menti, because if it goes wrong, then I'm like, I've got nothing else instead. So it's thinking about how you work best, and then you put your plans in place in that situation. And also thinking about how you work best is, how do the audience get the best out of me and get the best out of my knowledge and my experience? And often for me, that is storytelling. It's speaking with an audience rather than to an audience, and it's having as few slides as possible.
Yeah, for me, I find that almost practicing too much, it always goes wrong. If I try and memorize my speech, if I try and practice, it goes wrong. I'm very free flow. The meditations, I have I know there's different sections that I'm going to do, and when I almost allow it to flow out of me.
Yes.
That's how I do my stuff. And that's how I did it at the thing that we did, the speaking factor. And that was through me.
There was, and I love that you said that, because for me it's about embodiment. And if I think about where my speaking comes from, I'm not a classically trained actor, darling. I've never acted on the Broadway stage. I worked in A&E as a nurse and then ran my own healthcare business. And I've never come from corporate speaking and training. All the stuff I've done has been real world experience and then things I've got really geeky about. But one of the things which I've found really useful here is the mindfulness, the meditation, and certainly the postgrad cert I did in mindfulness, because it is about being present with your audience. And I remember Speaker Factor when you spoke so well, because you had that moment, you got it all prepared, and you had that moment where it wasn't going where you wanted it to do. And what you did, and the audience really wanted you. They wanted you to succeed. They were there to support you. And you did that thing where you just went, I'm just going to speak. And I would argue that out of all of the speakers, you're the one who connected with the audience the most, because what they saw you being human. They saw you in that moment of stress. You saw you with all the preparation. It didn't go in the way you wanted, and they connected with you on a human level. And it's beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And it sounds really bad, doesn't it? That I was getting this beautiful thing to watch in a moment where things weren't going well. But you went down the embodiment route. You spoke from the heart. You spoke from your body to the audience, and it connected with them far more powerfully than anything could have done.
I swore 3 times.
Fuck it. Who cares?
It was good though. It was like, oh my God, but yeah, let's go kind of thing. But yeah, you mentioned earlier about embodying your speech. How do you help clients to embody their speech?
I have a bias towards audio. So the process generally I go through when it comes to speaking is I do write a script. If I'm doing a keynote, there will be a script in there, whatever form it is. It might be something where it is line by line, word for word. It's all there. And then I record it. So I'll stand up and I'll deliver it. I'll record it on my microphone. And then I'll take that speech and I will listen to it back. And then I will edit the script based on what I'm hearing. Because the written word and the spoken word are 2 very different things. And things which I would write and things which I would say do not always work together. And so what happens is you end up distilling it down to something which sounds right. And also the speaking of your script shows you where it's a bit clunky. I liken a speech as to driving a manual car, that you have to go through that point where you change gears in order to build it up. And sometimes you'll slow down so you go through the gears. Now, if you were just slamming the gears backwards and forwards without using the clutch, it would be awful. Or if you haven't quite got that fine clutch control, it clunks a little bit. And so looking for those areas where you can smooth out the transitions and make sure it works. I then take that recording and it goes on headphones and I listen to it. Listen to it like a podcast. Listen to it like my favorite ever bit of music, and I listen. Because what happens is I love music. I've always been a fan of music for as long as I can remember. I was that kid and at a certain age who used to listen to the top 40 on a Sunday evening on Radio 1, and I'd be listening to it on my radio and I'd capture the songs. I'd be there with the record button ready to go and I'd capture it so I could record it and listen to it during the week. And so when I listen to music, the bits of it will pop up for me, and I find myself like tapping things with it and drumming along and waiting for the beat to kick in. And so I do that with my speech, because what I'm looking for is I'm waiting for the beat to kick in. And then eventually I get so fed up of listening to my own voice, because as nice as my voice might be to other people, to me, it just sounds like someone from Birmingham all the time. It's all right, mate, how am you? And it can get too much. And then you just express it. But that listening I do all the time. So I'll listen when I'm doing stuff around the house. I'll listen when I'm going out for a walk. I'll probably listen when I'm in the gym or driving. But I try and do as much walking as I can. So my National Trust membership is one of my favourite things, because I'll go to local National Trust places and I'll block some time out and I'll go and walk around and listen to it. And then I'll go and sit with a coffee and I'll read the script. And I'm trying to contact the material as much as possible. And then what happens is, with all the movement, you're not just listening in your ears and getting into your head and thinking about it word for word. Your body's taking it on board. And then when you stand on stage, you're not having to reach for each letter and each word. It flows. It appears. And what comes out your mouth is often not the same thing that you wrote down. Now, some of it, you want it to be there because you've written things in a very particular way. But most of the time, you are telling the same story, just in a different way. And nobody in the audience knows. Nobody in the audience knows, but you connect more with your material and you have that embodiment and that delivery, and it comes together in a very present way.
Oh, like that. I know from my own experience, I don't really like the sound of my own voice. And so once I record a podcast episode, I very rarely listen back to it. And that's on my own truth. So I very rarely listen back to my episodes. Yeah. And I just put it on. But I suppose you get used to your voice.
You do. And also, I'm aware that I've got my headphones in at the moment. I've got the microphone I'm using here. And this is just good in terms of sound. Sometimes if I'm on certain calls, the headphones work really well. But I'm aware that this kind of gives me a bit more of a sound of my own voice in my head. It's like when you wear headphones and you eat crisps, you think everyone in the world can hear you eating those really loud crisps. And what it does is it just keeps the sound in. But when you hear your voice coming back at you through speakers or on a video, it sounds totally different. And it's like the first time you see yourself on a photo. Because when I look in a mirror, my face is in a particular way, but on a photo, it's not. It's reversed. And you're like, oh, I've never seen myself that way before. It's something which is unexpected. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more you record yourself speaking and listen to it, or you record yourself speaking and watch it, and the more you look at your words and you look at your gestures, the more you can do with that intentionally, the more you can change things. And I know it's one of the biggest barriers I have with clients is, firstly, is getting them to record videos and send them to me to look at them. And secondly, them reviewing their own videos, because I want them to start seeing where they can make changes. But over time, you get used to it. Absolutely get used to it. But you do have to go through that painful stage.
Into people being afraid of recording, why is that?
We're just not used to seeing ourselves in that way. And I'm aware we're recording on Zoom at the moment. I'm aware that I've got my camera on the top here, which I'm very consciously looking at. So for eye contact and for connection. Below, I've got the Zoom window. You're at the top of the Zoom window so I can see more of you. But also I've got me underneath. Now I've got me underneath so I can frame myself. So I know if I'm doing something, my hands are down here, you don't know what I'm doing. It's probably going to be okay. It's not dodgy. It's not that kind of recording. But you can't see what I'm doing. So I want my hands to be somewhere where you can see them. So I'm using that as a reference point. But it's really hard to watch yourself on the screen. It becomes quite self-conscious. I'm like, oh, that chair's just in the wrong way. And oh my God, I need to water my plants. Or there's actually a bit on the wall over here. You probably might be able to see it where it's like the paint. I didn't have quite enough paint. So there's all these things which you're worried about. But it's quite fatiguing to watch yourself on a video. And I know during lockdown and when people moved to more of the online stuff, that we were in a situation where people were really struggling with their own kind of view. And this is why I can move my mouse across here and I can actually turn off my self view so I don't see it. But I think people just are not used to seeing themselves in that way. So used to seeing ourselves in mirrors. We're so used to seeing the world through our eyes. We're not used to seeing ourselves through our own eyes. And it's quite a shock, quite a shock.
Yeah. I must admit, I have myself in a small screen in the corner because I know that when I have my screen where it's split, I almost lose concentration because I'm looking at myself.
Yes.
And then, like Zoom calls, if I'm speaking, I will also have it on speaker view, and I'll have as few people on the screen as possible, because that way it makes me feel a bit more relaxed. Whereas if you have a screen full of 20 people on the screen, it almost becomes a distraction.
It can be. And this is the beauty of it, is everyone has a way which works for them. I like seeing people on the screen. But for me, it's a bit like working with an audience. If I'm speaking to an audience, I want to speak to everyone. I want to move around and look at everyone and make sure I capture people's eyes, because I want to know who in my audience is an ally, who's listening and who I can go to. And I know that if there's a moment where I'm just getting myself almost by centering myself on this and making sure I'm still on track. There's still going to be people in the audience who are my allies and they're going to look out for me. And I still remember doing a keynote last year at an event, and about 6 rows back, there was a woman at the back who yawned when I looked at her, and my brain, I went, that's interesting. I'm still delivering, and my brain's going, that's interesting. She yawned. She thinks you're boring. That was a really boring part of the story. That means you're not doing very well on this. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Maybe you should try. And it was all these things went on, and then the part of my brain tipped up and went, no, we're the session before lunch, and she's hungry and tired. It's fine. But I want to see those people because I want to be present with them. So if I have a screen full of people, I can look around and I can reference people. And the same way as I would in an audience, a physical audience, I'm talking to different people at different points. Like I'll ask someone a question. So I know in the audience yesterday, there was Hannah, there was Sarah, there was Rachel. We got a guy called Phil just next to Rachel. Phil had a weird name badge because actually he got Phil written on it, but the other side had Emma written on it, so we could play on that. So for having people, I've got people I can talk to, and it makes me feel like I'm having a conversation with them instead. So it means I'm more present with them. But everyone has their own style.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, because I must admit, when I speak to an audience, I do naturally pick certain people.
Yeah.
Because I suppose for me, it's that idea that if I try to focus on everybody, I'm going to get caught up in move myself out of my body, so I become less present. Whereas by focusing on a couple of people, I keep the presence, I keep the composure, I'm in that moment.
100%. And it's a skill. And there's various different bits of advice about every time you go, every sentence change, you move from one person to the next and the next. And I'm very conscious that I make sure I use the whole of the room as much as I can. But if we think of speaking as you're having a conversation with one person, and it just so happens that one person changes every few seconds, and they happen to be sat in a room full of hundreds of people, it's a totally different reframe because you're only telling the story to one person. A bit like podcasts. Podcasts are some of the most intimate form of communication, like a phone call. One person is listening to this at the moment. And by the way, you are a wonderful person listening to this at the moment. We love you very much, and go and listen to all the other episodes because they're really good. So we're talking to one person, even though we know intuitively we're talking to lots of people. But in that moment, the message is being received by one person. So speaking to an audience, deliver it as if you're delivering it to one person.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because at the end of the day, if you make one person happy, or if you interact and engage with one person and that person goes away and changes their habits or whatever they're doing, that's impact. I think we get too caught up in the idea that we've got to help masses of people all in one go. Whereas I think if you focus on helping one person at a time, that will progress to thousands, millions, billions.
Yeah. There's a ripple effect with it, and that ripple effect I think is hard to quantify. And what I would say, and I remember hearing this at a meeting once where somebody said, and it was great professional speaker, and I do agree with this in principle, but it can be quite harsh, is they said, if your speech only changed the life of one person, you're crap at your job. And I was like, oh my God. And somebody earlier in the day had spoken about that, about if your story changes the life of one person, that's the most important thing. And yes, we're changing individuals. The aim of any speech is to try and change as many as we can in that moment, knowing that we can't control that outcome. But if we focus on how can our story change an individual, when we're speaking to everyone, there's lots of individuals who can be impacted by that. And also knowing that different parts of what we say will impact different people in different ways. And then for me, it comes back to how we deliver our material. Because if you see a lot of speakers will have slides which are full of bullet points, there's so much in there, it's unreal. And the challenge there is we're giving people loads of information because we think loads of information equals loads of value, but people get overwhelmed and do nothing. The best thing we can do is simplify it down and say, actually, if there was 3 things that I could give you today, here are the 3 things I want you to take away. And actually, this is the one big message. And if you're going to do one thing, you get to frame it in those directions. And when we do that, when we think about how much we're giving to people, it can make a much bigger difference. I had a friend who we used to talk about Superman films for DC. And I'm a big Marvel fan. I love my Marvel films. They, for me, are just really good. DC, I love the characters, but the films not so much. And he described the DC films as the highest quality ingredients cooked in the most beautiful way and then put in a blender, and everyone gets 300 times what they really want. And I say this with speakers, that we have the most beautiful experiences and material, which are delivered in the most beautiful way, but we give them too much and we're not clear on what they take away from it. And people just go, it's too much. I can't do anything with this. And we've all been to those events where people, we had lots of people speaking, and we've come away and someone said, what's the one takeaway? And you've gone, I don't know, because there were so many potential things I could take away. I can't take anything from it.
That's it. You see all these online events where you have different speakers for an hour slots.
Yeah.
But then, and you're writing on paper all the stuff that they're saying. But there's so much stuff on the paper, I never come back to it because there's just too much. And so
Exactly.
You said the words, people think more is better, but I think less is better. And it's almost about how do you portray that thing to people in different ways so that they can to embody it.
Absolutely. It's not about the amount of information we have. It's what we do with that information. It's the action we take and the things we make happen because of it. And that's why with the work I do with clients, pardon me, I'm very clear saying, what do you want people to do at the end of this? What do you want them to think, feel, say, and what do you want them to do? Because if you're unclear on what you want them to do, then everything you're doing up until that point doesn't really matter. And the do is massively important. Whether that is, I want you to come and download this, or I want you to look at this, or I want you to come and have a conversation with me and work with me. You have to be very clear on, it's almost the strategy part. What is it you want people to do with it? And it's hard because we get volume and value mixed up. And I see this with so many academic speakers who they're used to teaching environments, they're used to giving lots of information, and they have 15 minutes on a big stage, so they fill it with as much stuff as they can. And I liken it to them vomiting out all of their information into the audience and then asking the audience to find the carrots. It's like you're putting pressure on your audience. And audiences are clever. They're very sensitive to authenticity. They know when people aren't being authentic or when they're being sold to. But also at the same time, you want to make the job easy for the audience to know which bits they take and which bits they use.
Yeah. So just to finish off, what is one piece of advice that you would give to the people out there?
Oh, it's very good. See, you throw me a really good one there. If you want to do more speaking, go out and speak. Doesn't matter whether it is going on video and doing something on social media, just pick it up and say, hi, I'm Dave, I'm going to talk about this today. Just do that. If you know an event you want to speak at, go and talk to people at the event and say, how can I speak on your stage? It is taking that action to just go and speak in whatever format it looks like. When I started doing BNI back in 2016. That was the first time I did networking. For me, it was a 60-second pitch, and the 60-second pitches were like, bleh, because they're all the same. And then in 2015, 16, and then more in 17, I started doing more social media video. And I know that me doing video and doing it more regularly meant that I couldn't be perfect. I had to put something out there. And that led to me getting opportunities to speak. And there's You want to go out there and speak in whatever way it looks like, because it covers everything. But there is a little bit of a bonus one on that one as well. And that is say yes to things and then work out how to do it afterwards.
Nice. Okay, one more piece of advice to overcome anxiousness and fear, in whether that's public speaking, whether that's business, whatever it is.
Know that it's normal.
Nice.
And understand that it's normal. I have some speaker mates who go, I don't get nervous before I speak. And I'm like, cool. For me, it's the reframing of nerves, and cheesy as it is, what is it? Fear. Fear is excitement. It's the same physiological response. That gets you through so much. But understanding that it's okay to be nervous because it's important to you what you're doing. You want to do the best job possible. You want to make sure that the audience gets something from it, but you don't want to be so fixated on that it becomes paralyzing. But understand that actually nerves, fear, apprehension, all of those things are normal. And it's not eliminating those, it's continuing with those and having those with you and knowing that they're an important part of it.
And just to finish off, can you tell people how to get in contact with you and what you currently offer?
Absolutely. Easiest place to get in touch with me is either LinkedIn. I'm on all over LinkedIn like a rash. I post every day and currently, and have done for well over 1,000 days. And I'm not saying every one of those days is any good. So LinkedIn, come and connect with me on LinkedIn. That'd be good. My website is davethecoach.co.uk. I definitely need to improve that at some point to something else. And you can email me there. In terms of the stuff I offer, I work with groups, so I can work with corporate groups and do some workshops on storytelling and speaking and presenting. And I work with individuals. And I love to work in person with either individuals or groups. And those sessions can be done online or they can be done in person as well. Well, I love in person. The great thing is that I can make a lot of this stuff fit with whatever your goals are. It's very bespoke to you. And I have a framework, but that framework is flexible to fit whatever people need.
Thank you very much, Dave.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If something in today's conversation resonated, take a moment to sit with it. And if you feel called, share this episode with someone who might need it too. You Matter, I Matter is a growing space. And if you'd like to stay connected, you're welcome to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps this work to reach people it's meant for. These conversations matter. You matter, I matter. Until next time, take care of yourself and the relationships in your life.